I'm Sean. I'm out of Austin. I have a company called Fortafy. We're a collective of nonprofit Salesforce consultants and administrators who service nonprofits. I met Bobby through this, and Bobby and I have done quite a bit of work with his product. I'll let him introduce himself.
Hello, everyone. I can hear myself, so I'm sure you can hear me. My name is Bobby Wright. That's me up there. I am an independent Salesforce consultant. I specialize working with nonprofits. I got started with Salesforce about 12, 13 years ago, working at a tiny nonprofit. They forced Salesforce on us, and we hated it. And so in my spare time, I said, I'm going to fix this thing. And then here I am today, Maha dreaming, sharing all those things that I learned how to fix. I'm a consultant, but I'm also an ISV partner. I have an app that I sell on the App Exchange. I don't sell it very often, though, because it's also freemium, so you can get it for free. It's called the Flow Toolkit. It allows you to build dynamic forms and interfaces with Flow, in my opinion, a lot easier than what you can do with the standard screen solutions. But that's me.
So a lot of stuff we're going to see today, you'll know is built on Bobby's stuff as well. What I'm hoping from this, we have 20 minutes. It's going to be fast, furious. We're going to try to give a little bit of knowledge as we can, but ultimately, why do it? Why use Experience Cloud if you haven't done it before? How to set up a site. So Bobby's going to go quickly through a little demo of the things you need to know to do that. So you can go home, you can go to your room later tonight, just pop up a site and get it done. And then we'll show you a sample of a site that we worked on together to give you an idea of what can be done, right? So why do it, right? We're all admins. We work in Salesforce all day. It's on the platform. It's freely available. There's a myth that Experience Cloud sites have a licensing cost. That's only true if you're going to have credentialed people and community users. So if you're going to have a credential login experience on the front of that, you're going to have community license. But otherwise, you can put up public sites. You can just launch a site. It's not hard. You can expose Salesforce data, reports, data, list views, anything that you can create basically a lightning view on in the system, you can expose, right? Obviously, you want to be careful with that. It eliminates the need for middleware, right? So how many people deal with Zapier or the like, right? Plugins on WordPress, et cetera, to connect data in. That can be frustrating. That can be hard. This right here reduces that. It's built into Salesforce. And then on top of that, whatever you do, however you're taking that data in, you can leverage the tools in Salesforce, like Flow, any automation tools. If you want to get more sophisticated to that, you can build some code. But you can leverage all of that, your dupe rules, your matching rules. You can apply those things to the data coming in. So a lot of advantages for doing that outside of the middleware solution, which if you've ever done it, can be limiting in terms of what you can do with that. And then finally, if you don't know this, you can create screen flows now, and you can expose those screen flows. So any kind of survey, report, simple forms, things like that you want to do, go create a screen flow, start dragging and dropping those elements onto a page, create your flow to be able to take and consume that information. Easy peasy, right? Now the things you want to know about it are the trade-offs, right? Why do it? What's the risk? Well, it's not terribly user-friendly. So if you're used to Squarespace, if you're used to like WordPress, if you're used to those drag-and-drop builders for websites, it's not that. Don't go in thinking that. It's getting there, but it's not that. There's no robust plugin community too, right? So if you've ever worked in Drupal, WordPress, things like that, they've got all these add-ons, all these WordPress plugins that solve every problem you can imagine. It's not that, right? It does mean you want to have a Salesforce administrator. You want to have somebody who knows what they're doing, especially because of the security considerations, right? You could be exposing data that you don't know. If you don't know what you're doing, that could be bad, right? I would suggest that HTML, CSS, some level of that is preferred if you want it to look like your brand, if you want it to look more like the other websites, etc. You're going to have some knowledge of that. Otherwise, it's going to look like out-of-the-box Salesforce sites, right? And then I mentioned the security considerations. I'm going to mention it again. Be careful. Know what you are doing. Take the trailhead. Talk to people. I would also suggest, if you haven't done it before in your first time, I was fortunate enough to work with Bobby on some of the first stuff I did and learn a lot about that security piece, right? have a third party take a look at what you did, have them audit it just to be sure that you're not exposing all your accounts, all your contact personal data, right? Be careful, all right? But if you're willing to take the risk, the possibilities are pretty great. We have built personally everything you see on the screen. Program applications, intakes, portals for people, volunteer. Bobby's built an awesome volunteer experience on top of Volunteers for Salesforce. Much, much better than what you would get out of the box. Community partner portals, member portals, grant management systems, things of that nature, right? So here's an example of a grant management system we built. You could see list views, but it takes advantage of all of what we talked about. There are screen flows in here, there are list views. Users can go in, they can do reimbursements on their grants, they can apply or adjust their grant budgets, they can submit their budgets, all of that. All of that is available in it. Now this is a community experience, right? This one has logins, this has a little bit more data we don't want to expose. This one is a workshop portal. So these folks wanted the ability for people to be able to, register for a workshop, have that registration come in, and then be able to access that registration, those details. So we created a publicly available version of that for them. Volunteer portal, we talked about that, right? Sits on top of Volunteers for Salesforce, allows them to go in, pick the volunteer shifts that they'd like to be able to do, register for those shifts, and then ultimately come back in and update that information, cancel their shift, things of that nature. And then on top of that, a course catalog. So, you're just getting the variety of things that we can do on top of this, right? So I'm going to turn it over to Bobby, who is going to now walk you through what are the simple steps that you need to take to launch that site, get it up and running, and then, get started with this.
All right, you can hear me again. One of the things that I really appreciate about Experience Cloud sites is that you can either build full portal experiences with multiple tabs, you can go to multiple pages, or you can, let me log in here, like what we did for this Wright site. This is just a single page. Very easy if you have a need to just collect an application of some sort. In this situation, they are registering for courses for these classes that they do. We just drop this flow onto the home page. So you have a lot of dynamic ways that you can utilize this. And Salesforce allows you to build up to 100 sites, which is a whole lot. I've never seen that many, but I've seen some orgs that have like 5. So this is what this looks like in here. You're going to go into your sites. You'll click New. You'll notice that you get these templates. If this does come up. Well, let me go over here. I loaded it already. Right here. You'll get these templates that you can choose from. There's some differences. Go look on the help documentation. It'll tell you about some slight differences in features that are available between these two different ones. If I was building just a very simple, I want to collect like a registration form or a volunteer application, a lot of times I just use this basic blank slate build your own org component. This one right here, the build your own LWRs. LWR sites are really, really cool. The one thing you have to know about those is that they do require you to have at least one license in order to actually utilize those. But whenever those pop up, everything else, when it comes to like building these sites, if you're used to building your Lightning pages inside of Salesforce, it's just like that. You have your components over here that you can select from. So if you're used to that, you just drag it onto the screen and you mix things up here. So this is an example of a volunteer job record page, and as you can see, it looks just like internal Salesforce. And this is something that most orgs don't like. When you're exposing your data to external people, it's like, this is not something that we're used to seeing. So one of the things that you can do inside of your Experience Cloud sites is if you go into your settings up here and you click on page variations, click a new page variation and click on new blank page. I personally prefer to use this flexible layout. This allows you to do multiple sections, add as many columns as you want, as opposed to, once again, what's typical inside of standard Salesforce where you have these just fixed layouts. So I would drop that on to the page there. I'll just say testing. And then basically what we do from here is we just override what we see on our blank canvas page here. So if we're on this volunteer detail page, A thing that I like is utilizing flow to show data that I want to about this record. So I'm not forced just to use the boring page layouts that we get with inside of Salesforce. So you do have a flow component that you can drop onto the screen. I'm not oh no, it disappeared. I clicked on the wrong button. So I'll go back here. I'll go back into my testing. They give you this flow component. One of the biggest downsides to this component is you can't actually see what that flow is going to look like. I don't know why they did it this way, but you cannot see it. And so if you're building a site, you really want to see, okay, what is this going to look like when I click publish? That stinks. The Flow Toolkit, highlight again, it's a freemium app. Anybody can use it, and so you can use this particular feature. It's really nice. Let me get rid of that, and I'm actually just going to toggle over here to my detail page. The Flow Toolkit comes with this component called Dynamic Flow. And when you drop that onto your page, you just drop in the API name of, actually not that one. You drop in the API name of your flow, and then it will actually render your flow onto the screen. I'm just messing way up over here. Don't step on that. You drop that onto your screen, and you can actually see that. So this is a page that we built with the Flow Toolkit. We're passing in the record ID from the record, because once again, it's just like regular Salesforce. If you drop a page layout onto your page, it's going to pull that data out of your Salesforce org and display that on there. And so we're just overriding that with the flow. You can put multiple flows onto your screen if you have different flows that do different things, or you can build one flat flow like what we have right here. The EcoRise org, just another quick little highlight here about working with this. What I really like about going back to staying inside of Salesforce is that if you're going to be building a solution that you're going to be exposing on an Experience Cloud site like right here, same thing, we're dropping this flow onto the page. That same flow that we're leveraging for our external users, we can reuse that for our internal users as well. If you don't want to have a convoluted process of go to this record, click new button, then go to these other records, click some new, edit those. You build out that flow one time, you drop that onto your internal user page, and they can reuse that. So this is what this final solution looks like when this is built out. And once again, this is very simple solution, a single page. Users come on here, they can select different courses that they want to register for. This information is coming out of a price book. And so inside of Salesforce, this organization, they just go and they add products to their price book, and then the flow dynamically shows what different courses they have available. So the users can then go through here, highlight again, all flow components that they then can go through a little form page, give information about themselves, and then this actually creates the opportunity, links those products to that. Very nice solution, and once again, we eliminated having to do an integration from another third-party tool to keep that in there. Our data is already inside of Salesforce. We're leveraging our fields that we already have configured.
Can you go into the settings stuff we were talking about with the public, making it a public, and
Sure.
all that consideration?
Yeah, so like Sean said earlier, a lot of orgs that I talk to say, "Oh, we don't use Experience Cloud because we don't pay for it." Like just knowing that anybody can spend an Experience Cloud site. It is free. When you go into your Experience Cloud site and you go into your settings here, you just want to enable this public access. Whenever you do that, your Experience Cloud site is going to create what's called a guest user, and that guest user is where you control all of your security for how your external users interact with your site. And so anything from creating sharing rules to exposing data to adding field level security and CRUD permissions, that's all going to happen through this guest user that gets created for that. And so every time you spin up a new site, you would get a new guest user. So this is one of the strategies. If you have some complex security requirements in your org, one simple way to not have to build too much into a single site is to split those up into separate sites. So that way your one site can maybe expose a little extra stuff because it's only specifically granting access to special records, and then you can have different rules for another site. If you combine them together, then you just have to put more logic into how those sharing rules and how you grant those permissions. Is that good, or want to go?
Yeah, it's good. I've got that punch list.
I know we're right at time, so I mean, I imagine any questions would be great.
much more of like a learning that we got doing something like this. So we recently, we have Blackthorn for a nonprofit, and we use their event management tool. My client needed to do like table registration, so buying a table, but then putting all the guests into the attendee information. So we built out a public-facing community page, put unofficial SF data table component on it. Between doing our prototype and when we actually started like doing this for real, there were some security settings that went in place with the site guest user, where they can't update contact information, and Blackthorn attendee is related to contacts. So we had to use a platform event to run the flow or run the data table update.
For sure. That's a really important thing. Security, Sean hit on this a bunch of times there, but security is the biggest concern. I interact with lots of nonprofits that are not taking security serious enough when they build out these solutions. Not even just talking about Experience Cloud. I've seen stuff in other form solutions where they're pulling in data and exposing that in the back of that, and that is not very safe. So you really, really do want to consider what you're exposing. And one of the things that Salesforce enables for you to not mess up is that a guest user does not have access to any records as the default. And because they don't have access to those records, they can't update records. And so you have to make a choice to say, I'm going to give access, I'm going to explicitly allow them to do this and this and this. And so when you do those types of overrides, you have to go through that process of, am I going to be exposing sensitive information? And so whenever I build out solutions for people, I very often only expose objects that are fine for being public, things like campaigns, basic event information. You saw in here like job information, like the price books. I don't typically go through in a guest site allow people to bring down contact information, expose it onto the screen. You typically handle that in the back end with processing, like what you're saying there with like a platform event, so that data never comes into the Experience Cloud site.
Well, in our case, we actually weren't exposing any contact data, but the back end of Blackthorn.
Sure. Yeah. And that's as me as well as with my app. You technically have more capacity just within your own org to say, I'm going to override the sharing thing. We as ISV partners, we can't build that stuff into our apps because we wouldn't pass security review. And so typically when you're working with third-party apps, you have to do your own workarounds because we can't do it for you.
Will security be a concern if you have the community? Or?
Yeah, so that's what I tell people. That's what you're paying for. You're paying for the peace of mind that when you buy a credentialed license, Salesforce is taking on that security for we know who they are, they've logged in, they're handling all the credentialed passwords and all that stuff. You still have to know that I've exposed this object and these records to them, but you have a lot more peace of mind when someone's logging in.
Yeah.
So what we're typically doing is very simple. I want to register for this event. If you want people to come back to a site and say, show me what I've registered for in the past, and let me change this about myself and this about myself, that's where you typically want to get involved with credentialed license, when you want people to interact with their own data.
Yeah, something like this site, right, it just consumes information. They're just picking stuff, they're filling out a form, we're not exposing anything. Right?
Every time they come back, they got to put their information in. We never let people say, oh, this is who I am, show me my past stuff. And
What was the question over here?
Well, I had another learning as well.
Let me
I put a flow on an Experience site, and they wanted it translated into Spanish.
Sure.
So just for reference, Google Translate and an integration with a flow isn't an issue that it will not translate the pick list values in your drop-down in a flow. So you have to create custom labels to do the translation of your pick list values. So even though it will translate the page, the drop-downs will not translate without the custom.
Yeah.
So that's what, I'd let you speak to your.
I work with a handful of orgs that have to do translations, and typically they're already using the translation workbench to translate their field labels or pick list values, and Flow does do that. And so if you can't utilize Google Translate though, but if you're already with an org that wants to have all your flows and your internal stuff translated, it just works out of the box. And so that's what I appreciate about it. I don't want to build 3 different flows for different languages. I can just say, hey, toggle my translation language selector up there, and your flow will just be translated.
Yeah. So just real quickly, I saw one more question before I jump into this, but I want to make sure.
Yeah, so when you're doing the layouts, as I understand it, you don't need flows if you're just gonna have it look like Salesforce, right?
Sure.
The components in, but then if you want to customize it, that's beautiful.
Yeah. And I mean, I even, it depends on what your purpose is. If you're working with external like constituents, that's where I think you typically want to get like CSS involved and maybe probably custom flows to make it look more appealing. I work with some orgs that we're really building like partner communities where we want like a related organization to get in there and to work with some data. In that situation, I'm like, who cares? It's like, it can look like boring Salesforce. If you wanted to spice it up, you can, but to do like the utilitarian work of just seeing your records, it's like regular out-of-the-box Experience Cloud stuff typically works fine for most orgs. For this.
And it's not hard to do. It just requires some CSS knowledge, right, to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yep. For sure. Did I see one more question for? So Bobby covered this briefly, but yeah, public settings, right? So you want to make that site public. You got to create that permission set for that guest user. Apply those permissions to the specific fields, to the specific objects, which can sometimes be forgotten, right? If you add a new field to that object later, but you haven't given it permission to that permission set, it's not going to show, right? So make sure you're on top of that. Create sharing for the site guest user for those objects, and then make sure you grant that if you're going to do screen flows in it, make sure you're granting access to the flows as well, right? So when you're laying that flow into the Experience Cloud site, that particular screen flow needs to also have access for that particular user, right? And then, extra credit, you can always create a site domain. So part of it too is if you wanted a vanity domain like you saw with EcoRise, theirs is learn.ecorise.org. You can do that obviously within Salesforce as well and point it to that site. So you can create up subdomains as well for that experience, right? So no reason not to do it if you have simple needs like this.
Another thing, at least a lot of orgs that I work with always want is, especially when we're talking about flows, they want to inject their flow forms into their existing websites. I try to push people to say, hey, keep it in Experience Cloud because there's all these other features in Experience Cloud that are really nice, and just do like a navigate to Experience Cloud, and then within your flow, there's a lot of like unofficial SF, the flow toolkit. They come packaged with some flow actions that you can navigate back to websites. And what I typically do is on an org's website, they might have a button say, oh, here, register. We navigate them to the Experience Cloud site. It looks exactly like their site with their branding. Then when they click submit in that flow sends them back to the website. So the user, for the most part, doesn't even know that they left the website.
Yeah.
That's a simple design model to not have to overbuild. While you can inject your flows into your website themselves, I've always found it nicer to stay in the Experience Cloud site.
Yeah. And because you can pass in parameters as well, you can also do this where you're passing in IDs and other information that can then be used to pull up a record or, which partner, right, is it that's trying to access it. So, all right, that's it. I wanted to put these up there. All of what you have seen have leveraged some of these tools. So if you're looking for a reference, and I did it mainly if the slide gets put into a collective deck of some sort. We mentioned Bobby's tool, Common Unite, unofficial Salesforce. Somebody mentioned them. They have a ton of flow components that are very useful for a lot of these things, just to improve some of the behaviors you want to try to inject in there. And then Avani has some really nice components too that really just improve the usability of those pages, right? So if you're just looking for more interesting ways to display data, they're also a really good source as well. All those are paid, except for unofficial, right?
I mean, I think actually all of them are free. Avani, you can use up to 10 users for free. Unofficial SF is all free. And Common Unite starts free. Or the Flow Toolkit, you can build anything you want on the case contact, lead, or account objects. And you can use all of the flow actions and any of the custom flow components that we have. But
cool. Thank you all. Thank you, everyone.